Space is something of a real enigma for the human mind to properly grasp, which is why it's often explored without becoming dull to us. Video games have been exploring the subject since their inception, and amidst the plethora of games, 1999's Homeworld is one of the most successful attempts at examining and representing the immensity of the great beyond. It's not just a great real-time strategy game, but a great work of fiction because of how effectively and correctly it melds gameplay and narrative together, creating an incredible and very memorable experience. I love this game and everything it does. Its ambition is well placed and shockingly fulfilled. Homeworld presents its story in an almost mythical fashion, a retelling of a distant fable if you will. On the harsh, desert-like planet of Karak, after centuries of war, cultural and social advancements and upheavals, legendary leaders and unifications, a discovery is made in the way of a ruined spaceship and a map pointing to another planet, Higara, your true home. This realization that the people of Karak aren't natives but exiles from a long-forgotten time thousands of light years away pushes them to construct the mothership, which after decades of work is successfully developed, capable of finding their long-lost world. The opening cutscene instantly engages you into the world thanks to perfect scene direction and a captivating score. This is how you open up your space epic. So after getting the handle of the controls and the basic mechanics, like using the warp drive to exit levels, you fight a few hostile, unknown ships. You then return to Karak. The entire planet and every person that wasn't aboard the mothership is now dead from a massive orbital bombardment. This genocide committed by the enormous Titan Empire for breaking a 4,000-year-old treaty has left you alone and unsupported with only 600,000 survivors. All of a sudden, the optimism and encouragement is gone. You have no way back. The only option is to press forward onwards to Higara or die. It's a hell of a way to begin your game, but damn it if it isn't effective. Homeworld is about being the underdog for the entire game, and it frames this brilliantly as one of its finer points. You may have an awesome spaceship, but space is a wide, uncaring and brutal environment with an entire empire who are keen on destroying you. They outnumber and outgun you in almost every engagement. This forces the crew of the mothership and yourself to be tactically smart to not just win, but survive. Your mothership is the centerpiece of the game. Once destroyed, it's over. Thankfully, it's easy to defend, sidestepping the awkward problem of the game just being purely defensive with the exception of a few levels. But besides protecting it being a constant objective, its multi-purpose functions makes it the unit building component of the game. This really streamlines the gameplay as you don't make structures with the mothership as it's capable of pumping out and maintaining hundreds of different ships. Building your fleet is restrained by the resources available, your unit limit, and the research conducted by your science vessels. The latter is pretty simplistic. As the game progresses and you encounter new enemy types, you can emulate or buy their technology from the Bentusi, nigh omnipermanent spacefaring traders. These guys are awesome. Otherwise, unlocking new ships is done by watching a bar fill up. There are different classes of ships. Strikecraft are cheap, maneuverable fighters that are good at tying up enemy forces and chipping away at their health. The larger corvettes handle enemy strikecraft, and the frigates and capital ships are the brunt of your fleet, doing most of the heavy lifting with their strong offensive and defensive output. Wielding your forces in Homeworld isn't too difficult, impressive with it being one of the first fully three-dimensional real-time strategy games. Relic has really filed down on the cumbersome technicalities of controlling your units, with a focus on hotkeys and group formations. Units are moved by setting a waypoint. Holding a key allows the elevation to be adjusted. The larger, detailed tactical map allows distant orders to be placed. This can be a little confusing, but the UI makes it clear the general distance you are between units. This keeps everything in perspective during the often huge battles that you would otherwise lose yourself in. Attacking is done either through clicking on a singular target or dragging a box over an entire group, with them all being attacked simultaneously. Groups of units can be tied to numbers for formation placement and engagement priorities. Telling your guys to be aggressive or evasive is great at eliminating threatening adversaries quickly or to avoid taking heavy casualties. You'll want to keep the fighters in an X or claw formation to inflict the heaviest damage and surround targets quickly. Frigates and capital ships are bulky and slow in groups, but inflict massive damage on enemy forces, so wall or sphere formations are the best to concentrate firepower. Now that I think about it, those were the only formations worth using. You'll rarely use individual units, as most of the opposition have a strong counter to them. A bunch of cruisers are easily overwhelmed by a faster strikecraft that slowly chip away at their hulls, nor can strikecraft do much against multi-turreted beam and missile vessels that will swipe them down. Since many levels' primary objectives involve destroying a large, well-defended target, this leads to more combined armed strategies where mixing lighter to heavier ships is the key to success. Overall, the entrance to the battles is your largest contribution, as the rest is hands-off as you wait to see the outcome. You can save a load at any time, but save scumming is hard when skirmishes and full-on assaults are so dynamic and at times lengthy. You also have non-combat oriented ships like resource collectors, science vessels, probes and refuel ships that maintain and build the fleet, and a fleet you will build, though not in the way you'd imagine. While there are clusters of resources in each map, even if you scour each and every one of them, you'll never have enough to properly equip your fleet. Building stuff is expensive, especially with the enemy forces being replenished while you're still reinforcing your strike craft and corvettes between missions. You just can't spare the energy building up a large enough fleet to counter them. This is where the salvage corvettes come in, which pushes Homeworld from great to all-time classic. With the right number of salvage corvettes, almost every vessel in the game can be captured. Once a group of corvettes latch onto an enemy ship, they drag them back to your mothership where they're processed into becoming part of your fleet. This is fucking awesome. Every engagement, every fight turns into you methodically weighing the value of your soon-to-be prizes as you tie them up with your fighter craft before sending in the salvage teams to yank them back to base. It is incredibly satisfying being able to nab a score of frigates that you otherwise couldn't afford. This becomes even more important as stealing ships is the only way to increase your maximum fleet size after reaching the low unit cap. Even better is that you can pick up advanced ships early on, giving you a very helpful and distinctive advantage. There's also rare and unique ships encountered for a level or two before permanently being gone from the game. This makes catching them even more important. This gives the game loads of replayability, as it's not long before you stop thinking about destroying the enemy, instead look at capturing them in daring plans in this weird semi-passive warfare. Of course, it's not easy, with salvage corvettes so weak and enemy ships prone to blowing up from the fighting has you saving and loading frequently. But holy shit, that moment where I divided an enemy fleet, picked off their carrier and destroyer before bringing them into my fold was just the best fucking thing ever. The game is full of these great random events of strategic brilliance where you patiently coordinate your forces. I love it so much. Aside from the novelty of being a space pirate, if you want to win Homeworld, you need to capture a huge fleet. For most of the game, it ain't too hard, as the opposition can be neutralized with some timely choices, but the last few missions through against an armada of highly armed warships that will totally and absolutely destroy you. In particular, the last level is easily the hardest of the game, where you're pushed to your absolute limits. I knew what I was getting into and I struggled to the finish line, as my previously impervious fleet was swiped aside again and again. If you're not ready for the endgame challenge, you're better off starting a new game. Many players will hate this busy work, but I don't. There's a real visual and gameplay impact as your fleet gradually grows in size from a small skittish force into a falling hammer through space. I do have grievances with some of Homeworld's gameplay, like the mission variety, which I haven't talked much about, because there really isn't much to talk about. Most of the missions are about destroying an enemy fleet or base, or defending the mothership from incoming attacks. There are some hoops thrown your way in new ship types and environmental factors like asteroids, but there really is a lack of distinctiveness from mission to mission. This makes a lot of Homeworld just blur together and lack those memorable stages that are needed in single-player focused games. Aside from it testing your skills, so will it test your patience, because there is a lot of dead air. Having your fleet lumber its way into position is great at building up tension and anticipation for the coming battle, but not so much when you're waiting 10 to 20 minutes for some ships to catch up or move through miles of empty space. It's boring. With resource collection, it gets worse. As long as there are resources remaining, collectors will set off to do their job once commanded. This is fine during actual gameplay, but you may want to clean up the remaining area afterwards before moving on to the next level. This means you have to wait literal hours of time as they slowly mine away or abandon them completely. A skip or time multiplier option would have easily fixed the two most prominent issues in the game. A couple of the nitpicks would be the physics being balked to hell. In this fight, I tell my fighters to be evasive. So what do? Crash and explode. Awesome. Another one is where a large enemy vessel can insta-kill anyone in the way. I mean, you guys could just try to okay. No, oh wait, could you... No, there goes my frigates. Yep, this is just fine. Otherwise, I have very little else to complain about with Homeworld's general gameplay and design. I have even less to be critical of the presentation, which in my humble opinion is objectively brilliant. There's a brevity of small, unique animations and interactions for the many different units. Turrets move and take aim on capital ships, and fuel-based units will dock with carriers to refit themselves. It never gets old watching ships twist and maneuver through space, leaving trails as they fire away. trying to use the last bit of fuel before eventually succumbing to their foes in a fiery explosion. These micro-stories is what makes truly great RTSs, especially when you can hang on to these guys for the entire game. What's more, ships will give off radio chatter, confirming orders and situations, as well as hinting at the status of battles. This gives everyone a real sense of personality, which adds that weight to your commands when you willingly sacrifice them. This just shows how different Homeworld is to other RTS titles that encourage wasting away waves of indifferent troops for some unrealistic goal. I'd be doing a disservice for not mentioning the phenomenal soundtrack. Reimaginings of classic string pieces with choir additions and a highly original selection of Near Eastern inspired tracks complementing the gameplay makes one of the best scores in any video game. It's honestly difficult for me to find serious faults with the game. By no means will everyone enjoy it, but there is so much done here at Homeworld that wasn't done before and hasn't been replicated since. I feel that being almost 20 years old and still managing to be highly relevant and competent in almost every way is a true testament to the legacy and success of the series. I have zero issues in recommending this game.